What happens when an astronaut is stranded alone on Mars after a deadly storm? Let's find out. In 2035, the Hermes crew lands on Mars for a 31-day expedition. On the 18th day, they explore Acidalia planitia. Botanist Mark is collecting samples for analysis when Beth, the system operator, warns them about an approaching dust storm and tells everyone to head back to the habitat, or HAB. The crew suits up and heads out, but the storm hits them right away. They push through, with Mark bringing up the rear to close the HAB door. The storm is so strong it could tip their Mars Ascent Vehicle, MAV, and Mark thinks they might anchor it with cables in the rover. Suddenly, a satellite dish is blown loose and Mark is hit by it. His suit is pierced, and the computer warns of a breach. The crew can't find his vitals, so Melissa has to leave him behind and join the others in the MAV launch. The ship leaves Mars, and the crew mourns their friend. On Earth, NASA Administrator Teddy announces the crew is returning without one astronaut. But Mark isn't dead. The metal from the satellite dish has actually covered the hole in his suit, keeping him alive. Once the storm ends, he wakes up to low oxygen levels. Carefully, he removes the metal, finding a small piece still stuck inside. Using forceps, he removes it and closes the wound. Mark spends the first day resting, but boredom sets in. He organizes the HAB and boxes up his friends' things, looking at their photos and deciding he isn't going to give up. The next day, he arranges the food, including some potatoes saved for Thanksgiving. Inspired by his training as a botanist, Mark sets up a small greenhouse using Mars' soil and fertilizer from the crew's bathroom waste. Days go by with Mark tending to his garden, maintaining the HAB, and checking the solar panels. By day 54, he's thrilled to see the plants growing. Back on Earth, a satellite operator spots changes near the HAB and informs the team, confirming Mark is alive. The Earth team debates how to handle the situation, concerned about Mark's psychological state and public perception. By day 70, Mark starts planning for the long term. The next manned mission will land 3,200 kilometers away, but the only working rover can travel just 35 kilometers at a time. Mark scavenges parts from a damaged rover, doubling the battery life of the working one. He tests it at night and notices how cold it gets, but the heater would drain the battery. To solve this, he carefully digs out the radioisotope thermoelectric generator full of plutonium and connects it to the rover, giving it enough power for a long journey. Vincent explains on a press conference that Mark likely wants to travel to the landing site, but NASA advises waiting for a rescue mission. Teddy wants a supply probe built quickly, cutting the usual 9-month process to 3 months. On day 79, Mark harvests his first potatoes. He replants the smaller ones and saves the larger ones for food. Looking for a way to fix communications, he drives the rover to recover the Pathfinder probe, which fell silent in 1997. The Earth team helps by programming a Pathfinder replica, and soon both probes communicate. Mark holds up signs to answer questions, and the team sets up a system to send more complex messages. Through this setup, Mark explains how he survived, emphasizing it wasn't the crew's fault. NASA guides him to hack the rover so it can communicate with Pathfinder. Soon, he receives messages from Vincent, telling him the world is watching and rooting for him. Plans for a supply mission are underway. Mark, frustrated that the crew doesn't know he's alive yet, sends some colorful language to the global broadcast. Teddy reassures higher-ups that Mark's behavior is stress-related. Mitch, a flight director, secretly contacts the crew, and they receive a video update. They're shocked and feel guilty for leaving him behind. By day 128, Mark shares how NASA is now micromanaging even his crops. He receives emails from the president and his university, telling him that growing crops officially counts as colonizing Mars. Mark proudly announces he has colonized Mars. NASA requests a photo, and he tries to be funny instead of formal, irritating Annie, the media director, but Teddy decides to post it anyway, along with the news that supplies will be sent in about 9 months. Food should last him until then, but Teddy still worries about potential problems. One night, after finishing some maintenance outside, Mark heads back into the HAB. Suddenly, there's a malfunction, and a hole rips open in the wall. A small explosion throws the airlock across the ground before it crashes. Mark survives, but his suit is damaged, and he's losing oxygen. Thinking fast, he uses tape to seal the cracks and reseals the suit just in time. When he gets back inside, he finds that the explosion has destroyed all his plants. Frustrated, he grabs some supplies and spends the night in the rover, yelling at the situation and sending a message to Earth. At NASA, Vincent calculates that the remaining food will last Mark about 200 days. Teddy immediately orders the team to speed up work on the supply probe. To help keep Mark occupied, NASA links his signal to the Hermes, so he can send messages to the crew too. The next day, Mark cleans up the garden and fixes the hole in the HAB. That night, he tries rationing his remaining potatoes, but another storm outside only adds to his stress. Meanwhile, back on Earth, astrodynamicist Rich jokingly mentions how Earth and Mars are badly aligned, which sparks an idea for a faster way to send supplies. Teddy keeps looking for ways to speed up the mission, cutting steps wherever possible. By day 154, Mark is down to the bare minimum of food, even mixing it with medicine to make it last. 4 weeks later, the supply probe is finally ready. Everyone at NASA gathers to watch the launch. At first, it seems fine, but soon the probe encounters a large precession and explodes within minutes. The mood in the control room drops immediately, and Vincent has to break the bad news to Mark when he asks for an update. On day 186, Mark sends a message to Melissa, asking her to check on his parents when she returns to Earth and tell them everything about their time on Mars. He wants them to know he loves them and that he's proud of what he's doing, even if it costs him his life. Meanwhile, the China National Space Administration watches Teddy explain the probe failure during an interview. China has a more advanced booster that could help NASA, but it's classified, so any assistance has to remain secret. Teddy agrees to the confidentiality deal. NASA engineers work on preparing another probe in just 28 days. Rich finishes his calculations and presents a better plan to Vincent using a simple visual demonstration. Instead of sending the probe directly to Mars, they can launch it with the Chinese booster to intercept the Hermes near Earth. The crew can pick up supplies and use a slingshot effect around Earth to quickly return to Mars for Mark's rescue. The plan would add 500 days to the Hermes crew's mission. Mitch thinks Melissa and the others should decide if they want to take the risk, but Teddy refuses, worrying about losing the entire team, and sticks with the original plan. On the Hermes, Beth discovers an encrypted message and decodes Rich's plan. The crew discusses it, and Melissa reminds everyone of the risks. They won't see their families for over a year. It could be considered mutiny, and the slingshot maneuver could fail and kill them. Despite the dangers, the crew votes to go for it. NASA receives a message from Beth joking about Rich before realizing the Hermes is already off course. Teddy has to inform the press about the new plan and suspects Mitch helped the crew bypass protocol, warning him he'll have to resign afterward. By day 219, Mark starts modifying the rover to carry enough supplies for the long trip to the crater where the other MAV is located. NASA runs tests in their labs and sends updated information to help him. Chinese engineers coordinate with NASA on the booster, though language and culture differences cause some communication challenges. The Hermes crew calls their families to warn them they'll have to wait 500 more days to reunite. Mark tests the rover and confirms everything is working. The new booster is successfully tested, and the supply probe launches without issues. 7 months later, Mark prepares to leave Mars. He records a final video log, turns off the HAB systems, and marks day 461 on the wall before climbing into the rover. The journey is long, and he stops regularly to recharge the rover using solar panels from the HAB. During these breaks, he admires the Martian landscape and takes short naps. On day 517, NASA discovers an issue. The Hermes can't enter Mars orbit without risking enough fuel to return home. The MAV can only reach low orbit, so Mark will need to reach extra speed to escape gravity. To make it work, the MAV has to be stripped down by 5,000 kilograms, removing seats, control panels, some survival systems, the nose airlock, and even windows, which are replaced with canvas. Mark would have to wear his suit the entire time while the Hermes crew pilots remotely. The plan is extremely risky, but there's no alternative. When Mark sees it, he swears in frustration. On day 538, Mark finally reaches the crater. He records one last log, joking about the absurdity of the plan, but also admitting he likes the idea of being the fastest man in the history of space travel. He begins stripping the MAV down to the bare essentials and covering the top with canvas. By day 560, Melissa goes over the rescue plan with the Hermes crew, assigning roles to make sure everything goes smoothly. They're even prepared to jump off the ship to help Mark if needed. The next day, Mark eats his last food supply and leaves a note for any future astronaut who might find the rover, asking them to take care of it because it saved his life. People around the world gather outside NASA and in city streets to watch the rescue. Mark shaves and cuts his hair, puts on his suit, and climbs into the MAV. With Hermes close enough, they switch to comms instead of signs, and Mark tearfully thanks his friends for coming back for him. Melissa counts down, and the MAV takes off. Minutes into the flight, the canvas blows off, causing a pressure drop that makes Mark dizzy until he passes out. Hermes shuts down the booster remotely and realizes the MAV is farther from the ship than planned. They could use backup fuel, but that would make the speed too fast for interception. When Mark wakes up, he reports he's fine, apart from a few broken ribs. He suggests using the escaping air from his suit as a makeshift thruster. The crew adapts his idea, deciding to blow off an airlock to generate thrust. Alex builds a bomb from the ship's supplies, which Chris sets up on the airlock. Calculations reveal a small mismatch, so Melissa suits up for a spacewalk. The bomb goes off, the airlock is destroyed, and Hermes moves closer to the MAV. Chris hooks Melissa up to a rope for the rescue, but it's too short. Mark uses his idea, piercing his suit to steer with the escaping air. He struggles at first, but eventually gains control. Melissa times her spacewalk perfectly and manages to grab him. They're pulled in safely, and the crew informs Earth that the rescue succeeded. People around the world celebrate. Once recovered, Mark becomes a survival instructor for future astronaut candidates. 3 years later, a new mission to Mars is successfully launched.